Hello to all of our listeners, and welcome back to The Parent Solution, your one-stop shop for all things educational. I'm your host, Kimberly, and today I'm talking about a rather explosive and what I might call controversial topic. In particular, I'm chatting about the Canadian government's further infiltration of public schools with harmful narratives, and specifically the newest edition in British Columbia and in Alberta at this point in time of recording this podcast. I'm talking about SOGI 123. Now, in recent years, gender identity has become a hot topic. You have to live under a rock to not have noticed that. It's a concept that's been pushed by activists and politicians, and now it's being pushed by teachers. And this subject is being weaved into the fabric of our everyday lives. And more than that, specific opinions are being turned into school curriculum for young children. Now, let me back up just a little bit. I'm talking about SOGI 123. For those of you listeners who may not know, SOGI, S-O-G-I, stands for Sexual Orientation and Gender Identity. This is a program that has been placed in some of the British Columbia school boards, as well as the Edmonton Public Schools in Alberta. The curriculum focuses on, quote, facilitating discussion and awareness about sexual orientation and gender identity by enforcing programming in schools to create an inclusive environment, end quote. The first concern with this sort of curriculum and this sort of program is that it teaches that sex and gender are not remotely related to each other. Now, if this is someone's opinion, then they are very well entitled to their opinion. The issue is that this concept, which has no scientific or logical backing, is being taught to children as fact. Children are expected to learn that gender is a spectrum and that they should not at all associate it with their genetic sexual makeup. The second problem with this is that the curriculum's only expectation of the parent is that they will follow along with the curriculum and bring it into the home. This program is being taught to children as young as, wait for it, 4 years old. What happens to the parent who does not agree with the program? Are their opinions heard and respected? And what about a child who's not comfortable with sharing the washroom with a child of the opposite sex who chooses to identify as the same gender? Looking at the SOGI 123 school climate map, it stated, during this discussion, students may say that some people don't feel comfortable with a trans person in the washroom. Take this opportunity to ask whether their discomfort is because of inappropriate actions or behavior by the trans person or simply their presence. What would we say to someone who feels uncomfortable sharing a washroom based on another person's ethnicity? So clearly we can see here that the discomfort of the child is not respected. Their right for feeling safe within the school is superseded by the right of the trans person who wants to use the same washroom. And this is what I find ridiculous. Gender is likened to race, even though they are both very different issues. Now, the third problem with this, and the biggest problem, regardless of your opinion on whether this should or should not be included or talked about, is that this is an actual curriculum. Teaching sexual orientation and gender identity to grade 2 students and even grade 1 students is now a part of the traditional public education system. A child may be able to graduate without actually being literate, but at least they'll be able to name off the gender spectrum. When did one become more important than the other? I think there's a serious need for parents to ask the right questions about why curriculums are being put into place. And this is necessary, disclaimer, this is necessary not only for SOGI 123, but for every new curriculum and program that's brought into the public schools. If questions are not asked of these programs as a parent or a caregiver, you are now left in the dark about what the material is that's being taught to your child. So some questions to ask of this particular curriculum are, who is putting SOGI 123 in place? Who does SOGI 123 benefit? How does this program or people who are involved with this program respond to a student or family that does not agree with the curriculum? Why does the school feel the need to enforce this curriculum? Why does the school feel it can do a better job of teaching sex and gender to my children than I can as their parent? And the last one, which I think is one of the most important questions, what can I do if I do not agree? Now, I just wanted to take a moment here to reference something that is on the SOGI 123 website. It says, quote, teachers are best equipped to determine what is age appropriate for their classrooms, end quote. As an educator, I will tell you that statement is not true. Do you know who's best equipped to determine what is age appropriate for their child? You are, as the parent, and don't let anybody tell you otherwise. If you are uncomfortable with any topic being taught to your child and you deem it inappropriate, as their parent, you need to speak up for your child and be an active part of their education. You are the parent or caregiver. Exercise your rights as such. Now, something that I do want to provide as a solution, and as something that I think a lot of parents don't know, and this is something I'll speak about in detail on a future podcast, it's the concept of loco parentis. Now, that is a Latin term for power to the parent, essentially. And this, when you register your child with a school, this is the power that the school has. And if you look in the Education Act or in any sort of formal documentation, then you will find that in there. If you are asking yourself, how can schools get away with this? How can schools decide what's best for my child? That is why, because they have what we call loco parentis. Now, the key here is to make sure that you remove that from them. And it is possible. It's a little bit of paperwork, but it is possible. That's something that you can do with any sort of curriculum, not just with SOGI 123. That's something I'll be speaking on in a few weeks, so don't forget to tune in for that. If you have any comments or questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to have a discussion with you. If you have anything that you feel is pressing that you need to say, either about this issue or others that have come up for you, you can always find me on social media. It's Star Students on Facebook and LinkedIn, or starstudents.learning on Instagram. You can also reach out through email, which is all over social media channels as well. Thank you, as always, so much for listening, and I'll be back next week.